Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Sedge Circle podcast. How are you today? I hope you are well. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge my international listeners. I have recently been able to see some information as to where my listeners come from, and I'm happy to say that aside from America, where I live, I have quite a few listeners in Mexico, Puerto Rico, as well as Italy. Now, I don't have the specifics on each country, but I do see that San Juan, Puerto Rico, that there's some listeners there, so I wanted to take a moment to welcome you. I find it so inspiring that someone like me has a voice that's reaching beyond our borders, and I just wanted to thank you for listening today. In this podcast, I probably cover about 50% witchcraft and 50% what some would consider self-help. And I've said it before, and I will say it again today, and probably many times in the future. A witch's greatest strength is themselves. The witch's greatest strength is knowing themselves, being at peace with themselves, doing the shadow work, and shining light on all the dark places. I remember the different kinds of spells I saw when I started on my witchcraft journey. So many of them were how to make someone fall in love with you, how to get rich, how to banish someone, and how to make yourself more beautiful. But the truth of the matter is, I believe those spells were cash grabs and nothing more. Spells like these come from a place of unhealthy comparison, fear, and inadequacy. They are the beauty advertisements of the witchcraft world, only meant to further the idea that you are not enough as you are. There's a strange idea, a fantasy, if you will, that's often perpetuated by Hollywood, that witches are always seeking power, fame, beauty, money. And usually in those movies, the witches end up biting themselves in their own backsides in search of those things. And I am fully aware there are witches out there who are in fact searching for those things. I am constantly criticizing social media, both for its depictions of witchcraft as well as what I think it's doing to us. Social media is creating impossible standards under very bright lights, photoshopping, with various managers and specialists, and the witchcraft community is no exception. And unfortunately, in most cases, I feel Hollywood leaves out something very important. They leave out the fact that a good witch will know their strengths, their weaknesses, but most importantly, a good witch will know the value, the inherent value in themselves as a creation of nature. Now, I understand this is entertainment and not to be taken at face value. Those movies are for fun, which everyone needs every now and again. These movies are in many cases echoes of centuries of old narratives applied to witches. But I'm sad to say there are people who truly believe those films to be accurate depictions of what it means to be a witch. Oddly, one of my favorite Hollywood witches is from the movie The Craft. And no, it isn't any of the 4 teenage girls. It's Lirio, the shopkeeper. She is wise, calm, respectful, and trusts in her own intuition. She trusts in herself and her intuition to guide her. She seems to have an awareness about herself, that she is powerful, but only because she is a part of something much bigger than herself. That, and who wouldn't want her little occult shop full of books, trinkets, and wonders? I know I do. Witchcraft itself is very much like fire. If you have ever lit campfires or worked with fire at all, you know that unless it's respected, the fire is quick to consume. It can get out of hand, and while it can still warm you, it can definitely burn you. Now, when I say that, I don't mean your spell specifically is going to backfire and by some dogma you'll be cursed or any of that nonsense. No. When I say that, I mean that if a witch isn't secure in themselves, they will be their own undoing. If a witch does a spell and the intentions behind that spell is born from fear, greed, control, then that spell will do nothing but eat away at that witch's spirit. It may sound dramatic, but convincing yourself you're inadequate and acting out of fear, greed, or control is its own kind of curse. I'm willing to bet that most of you who listen to this podcast have lives. You have things you have to do every day, like washing dishes, getting dressed, going to work, and all that other stuff that's required for survival. I'm willing to bet that at the end of a long day, you probably come home, maybe change into something comfortable, and try your best to relax. And honestly, I think that's what most of us do. And when our lives don't look like the lives that we see on the internet or in movies, it can leave us feeling a little inadequate. But today, I want to tell you something very important. Even I get caught up in this comparison trap. I see what other people are doing, and it does not look like what I am doing. And if I don't keep my head on my shoulders, that can make me feel very inadequate. This comparison trap leads me to believe that the incredible things that I have done and created do not live up to these ideals. Sometimes I think if I saw someone else doing what I was doing, I would think it wonderful. But because I see myself doing it, and I see the process it takes for me to do these things, I'm not as enamored as I would be otherwise. I said in a recent post on social media that I had been called to go inward, and frankly, I was having a bit of a difficult time with it. When moments like this happen, the first thing I do is to recognize that I am struggling. I remind myself that this melancholy will not last forever, and that there is something perhaps I need to address. I am incredibly patient with myself and allow myself to feel each feeling and sensation as it comes, with no expectation or judgment. And I allow myself time to rest and reflect. So during this last moment I was thinking to myself, as I do, and in my train of thought was a statement that I've been carrying around with me since. And that statement was, considering where I came from and where I am now, I would say I'm doing quite well for myself. And this is the only comparison that matters. I don't talk too much about my past on this podcast. I suppose it's because I don't want people to feel pity for me or to think that I am reaching for validation. And frankly, I don't like to come across as complaining. But I do think it's at least a little important for me to tell you where I came from, to give you context to where I am. In fact, I wish more people would be open to sharing their journey. We see enough of where you are. Tell us how you got there. But I digress. Today, I'm going to share a little bit about myself with you. I grew up in what many would consider a shack. It was a very old trailer. Half of the electrical didn't work. The water came from the faucet, brown, and we did not have heat until I was 15 years old. I had never even used an oven until that point in my life. There were rats in the walls, and even an entire beehive at one point. Throughout the house, pieces of plywood were screwed to the existing floor to cover up the gaping holes from where someone at some point had fell through it. And for a good year at least, we didn't even have a doorknob on our front door. I lived in this home from the ages of 4 to 17. My mother and father were both mentally ill and separated for most of my life. They were verbally and physically abusive. I feel it's important to say I was able to eventually mend my relationships with them, at least for the most part, but that was well after I had reached adulthood. So without going into too much detail, I'm fairly sure that by hearing these things, you can start to understand the type of environment that I grew up in. Now, in telling you this, I in no way am attempting to elicit any kind of pity or to suggest that I had it any worse than anyone else. The point that I'm trying to make is that the life I am currently living is a far cry from the life I have lived. So when I look back at where I came from, and I look at where I am now, I am incredibly proud of myself. Do I have a lot of money in a big fancy house? No, I don't. But I have food on the table every day in a safe place that I can call home. The relationships I have with my friends and family are ones that are supportive, caring, and uplifting. I know what it is like to live without these things, and I am grateful for them every single day. This, my friends, is the only comparison that matters. Where you were and where you are. Chances are most of our lives are never going to look like the lives of those on social media with their beige walls and fancy kitchen gadgets. But does it really have to be? Is that the symbol of our modern age of success and fulfillment? I'd like to say no. In fact, it is my opinion that if you have a small, steady stream of contentment in life, you're living a successful life. Happiness and contentment are terribly underrated, and they're not guaranteed. And this is where witchcraft comes in. It is a tool for you to better understand yourself, to focus your energy, set goals, and to feel supported by the universe. You don't need to be someone else's best. You don't even have to always be your best, because I can guarantee those people aren't always their best either. If you start feeling down, take a moment to reflect on where you came from and where you are. Don't forget your journey. Don't forget those tiny successes that cumulatively got you to where you are. They may not seem important now, but they were at one time. Don't forget your failures either, and the lessons you learned from them. And if you don't like where you are, you can take little steps to improve it every single day. But it takes time. Be patient with yourself and let love guide you. I give credit to living in concert with nature for my success. Working with the seasons and the phases of the moon has helped me to set goals and release the things that were keeping me where I was. It's helped me to remain focused and give myself the time I needed to enact real change in my life. Life, after all, is simply a balance of holding on and letting go. Let nature guide you. But let's not forget to have moments of contentment, to be happy where you are and what you've accomplished. Don't worry, seasons of growth will come. You don't have to force them. But try not to become so obsessed with growth that you forget to see the growth you've already made. We are currently in a season of extensive growth, that being the spring and summer. And with such high energies, it can be all too easy to forget these things. If you feel inspired, by all means, work that inspiration into your life. Just please, don't forget you are good enough as you are. So, my friends, I suppose that's all I have to say about that. Again, as always, if you like this podcast, please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. And if you're feeling exceptionally generous, you can always support the show by making a small donation on buymeacoffee.com, and the link will be provided in the description for that. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And until we meet again, my friends.